Salam and peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase. One continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. A critical clarification before we proceed. In our shared journey, I have sometimes misspoken the names of these dimensions. Let me correct that now, definitively. The first dimension is time. Its symbol is the Greek letter omega, pronounced omega. The second dimension is space. Its symbol is the Greek letter kappa, pronounced kappa. I have previously used the simple letter K. That was an error. It is kappa. The third dimension is motion. This encompasses all flow, dynamics, and propagation. Its symbol is the Greek letter nu, pronounced nu, like new. I have mistakenly pronounced this as V. That was an error. It is nu. So, they are time as omega, space as kappa, and motion as nu, built from both. Every higher derivative of phi is a final question about how phi changes. And each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. In this part 41, we confront an adversarial reality. We define the defense against Goodharting. This is the firewall mechanism that prevents a rule from being optimized to pass our tests instead of capturing truth about phi. The core revelation is systemic. Any evaluation metric can be exploited. A rule that is engineered to succeed at our gates may still fail at its true purpose, describing phi. The skill you will gain is that of a metric auditor. You will learn to detect when a rule is gaming the system and to design tests that are resistant to such gaming. Our core question is defensive. How do we prevent Goodharting, optimizing for gate passing instead of truth? This question targets the adversarial loophole in any validation system. Goodhart's law, famously stated, says, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. In our context, the measure is the set of validation tests at the epistemic firewall, the falsification tests, the robustness checks, the OOD generalization tests. The target is a rule's license. If a theorist can engineer a rule specifically to pass these tests, without that rule actually capturing a true constraint of phi, then the firewall has been fooled. The rule is a simulacrum of truth. It has the form of a licensed rule, but not the substance. The firewall's anti-Goodharting defense exists to close this loophole. This defense is necessary because the failure mode it prevents is systemic corruption. Once it becomes known that passing specific gates is the key to prestige, funding, and influence, an incentive is created to hack the gates. Research degenerates into a game of optimizing for test performance. The connection between licensed rules and the actual behavior of phi weakens and can break entirely. The entire epistemic enterprise becomes a self-referential game, producing rules that are excellent at surviving our audits, but useless or dangerously wrong in the real, ungamed world of phi. By building defenses against gaming, we force the engagement back to reality. We ensure that the only reliable way to pass the gates is, in fact, to discover something true about phi. The formal meaning in Holophase terms is an analysis of independence between test and tuning. Gaming occurs when there is a leakage between the information used to tune or design a rule and the information used to validate it. In the language of omega kappa nu, this leakage allows a rule to learn the specific signature of the test regime rather than the underlying phi pattern. The core revelation identifies 4 primary vectors of attack that the firewall must defend against. 1. Overfitting to the validation suite. The rule's parameters are subtly tuned to the specific datasets used for testing, not to the general principles of phi. 2. Metric manipulation. The rule is designed to produce outputs that mathematically optimize the exact metric of success, for example, minimizing a specific loss function, in a way that does not correspond to physical accuracy. 3. Leaking test conditions into training. Information about the OOD tests or the structure of the robustness audits is used implicitly or explicitly during the rule's formulation. 4. Selective reporting. Only successful tests are reported. Failed tests on other metrics or regimes are hidden. The triunity provides a diagnostic signature for gaming. A gamed rule often displays a telltale asymmetry. It performs well on the measured metric, but this performance is achieved by a kind of dimensional cheating. It tunes one aspect of the triunity to match the benchmark while allowing the other aspects to drift from physical reality. Specifically, omega gaming. The rule's temporal predictions, omega, are tuned to match benchmark timing data, but this is achieved by using unphysical spatial, kappa, structures or motional, nu, couplings that would break down under a different temporal sampling rate or timescale. The rule's spatial predictions are made to look correct in a specific representation, for example, a particular coordinate system or imaging modality. But this invariance is an artifact of the representation choice. The underlying dynamics, or temporal evolution, are wrong. The rule's dynamical predictions are stabilized by hidden frame conventions or unstated auxiliary assumptions. The apparent conservation or balance is a bookkeeping trick within that frame, not a real property of the phi pattern. The defense, therefore, is cross-modal, cross-representation, cross-regime testing. You must vary not just the data, but the very way you measure, represent, and interpret omega, kappa, and nu. You must force the rule to perform in arenas where its specific tricks are useless. This connects decisively to energy as tally. Gaming is often a form of cooking the books. A gamed rule can balance the energy ledger perfectly within the specific test suite by subtly tuning the definitions of credits and debits to fit the test data. It is accounting fraud. The audit for this is to vary the modalities, representations, and regimes of the tally. Use different sensors, different kappa measurements. Use different clock mechanisms, different omega measurements. Analyze the dynamics in different reference frames, different new perspectives. A true energy conservation law will keep the ledger balanced across all these changes. A gamed rule, where the balance was an artifact of a specific measurement pipeline, will see its ledger diverge. Its cooked tallies will break. The operational interpretation is the practice of blinding and pre-registration in experimental science, and of adversarial validation in machine learning. It is designing tests where the rule's designers cannot know the exact test conditions in advance, so they cannot tune to them. It is the use of completely independent validation teams using independently collected data with different instruments. The firewall role here is that of the adversarial validator. When a rule G arrives at the gate, having passed all standard checks, the firewall does not stop. It initiates a second layer of defense. It asks, could this performance have been gained? It then designs and executes a rotated test suite. New regimes, new sensors, new data representations that the rule's proponents did not anticipate and could not have tuned for. The rule must pass these as well. Let us formalize this. Let TT be our standard test suite. It consists of a set of challenges, specific datasets, specific robustness stress tests, specific OOD regimes. A rule G achieves a performance score S on T. S could be a measure of predictive accuracy, robustness index, etc. S, performance G on T. Goodharting occurs when the rule G is explicitly or implicitly optimized during its creation to maximize S. We can model this as G being a member of a space of possible rules, and the selection process choosing the G that maximizes S. If the test suite T is not comprehensive and independent, the resulting G may capture idiosyncrasies of T rather than truths of phi. The defense is to apply a rotated test suite, T primer. This suite must be non-overlapping in its data sources with T, different in its omega or kappa or null regimes from those in T, employing different measurement modalities or representations than those assumed in T. We then compute the performance on this rotated suite. S prime equals performance G and T prime. The logic of the defense is now clear. Prediction for a non-gamed truthful rule. A rule that captures a true phi constraint will continue to perform well when the test suite is rotated. Its performance will generalize to the new suites. That is, S prime will be approximately equal to S within reasonable bounds of statistical uncertainty. The rule is robust to changes in the testing protocol itself. Falsification condition, Goodhart signature. If the rule's performance collapses under test rotation, if S primal is significantly worse than S, this is the signature of gaming. The rule was overfitted or tuned to the original test suite T. Its license was gained by exploiting a vulnerability in the test design, not by discovering truth. The license consequence is severe and corrective. What is allowed? You are allowed to use test suites for validation. You are allowed to refine your rule based on iterative testing. However, the final certification of a rule must be based on its performance on a test suite that was not used for its final tuning, and ideally, that was designed by an independent adversarial team. What is forbidden? You may not use the final validation test set to iteratively tweak your rule. Design a rule with explicit knowledge of the exact OOD challenges that will be used at the firewall. Hide failed tests on alternative metrics or regimes. Claim a rule is universally valid when its performance is tightly coupled to one specific measurement technology or data representation. What happens when the check fails? The license consequence is invalidation and mandated adversarial review. Fail. Invalidate certification. Require red team review before reinstatement. The rule's license is immediately suspended. Its certification is marked as potentially gained. The rule is then handed to a red team, an independent group tasked with trying to break it, to find the regimes or representations where it fails. Only if the rule survives this dedicated adversarial assault can it be recertified, and even then, with a note that it passed red team review. Let us illustrate with an example from complex adaptive systems, the international development metrics for governance strength or economic stability in a post-conflict setting. Imagine a donor agency creates a rule, G-Aid, to determine the allocation of development funds. G-Aid states, funds are allocated proportional to a governance index score, which is calculated from frequency of public meetings, omega, number of women in local council seats, kappa, and documented cases of corruption prosecuted, nu. A well-intentioned local administrator, under immense pressure to secure funds for his district, learns the exact formula of G-Aid. This is the test suite T. He now optimizes for the metric. He holds frequent public meetings, high omega score, but they are brief, scripted, and allow no real discussion or dissent. The form of temporal activity is met, but the substance, the participatory omega rhythm of genuine governance, is absent. He ensures women fill council seats, good kappa score, but they are figureheads with no actual authority or voice. The spatial representation meets the quota, but the functional structure of decision-making is unchanged. He documents and prosecutes minor symbolic corruption cases, increasing new score, while systematically ignoring or participating in larger, more systemic corrupt practices. The motion of the judicial system is recorded, but its direction and efficacy are perverted. The district's governance index score under G-AID improves dramatically. It passes the donor's validation. Funds flow. Now, apply the firewall's anti-Goodharting defense. An independent adversarial validator, an anthropologist or investigative journalist, not using the donor's checklist, arrives. They rotate the test suite. They don't count meetings. They measure the diversity of opinions expressed in them, a different omega measure. They don't count council seats. They analyze the content of decrees to see who authored them, a different kappa measure. They don't count prosecutions. They survey local businesses on the frequency of informal payments, a different new measure. On this rotated suite T prime, the district's performance collapses. The high score on T was a facade, a direct product of gaming the specific metrics. The rule G-AID did not measure governance strength. It measured the ability to perform on three specific gameable metrics. Falsification condition met. Performance collapses under test rotation. Goodhart signature detected. License consequence. The rule GAID is invalidated as a reliable tool for allocating aid. Its certification is suspended. A red team of governance experts is mandated to tear it apart, to design a new, more robust set of metrics that are harder to game, perhaps incorporating indirect measures, randomized audits, and sentiment analysis from independent local media. Only then could a new rule be considered for certification. This example is universal. The formal structure is identical in scientific context. Consider a machine learning model for medical diagnosis. It is trained and validated on a curated dataset T from Hospital A, achieving 99% accuracy. Investigation reveals the model is not learning pathological anatomy, but is subtly keying on the specific brand of imaging machine used at Hospital A kappa artifact, or the typical patient background pattern on the scans, a new artifact. When validated on a rotated suite T prime from Hospital B with different machines, accuracy plummets. The model was gamed on the test suite. It did not learn the true Phi pattern of disease. Or in physics, consider a computational model of galaxy formation. It is tuned to match key observables from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, test suite T, like the galaxy correlation function, a kappa measure. It succeeds. But it does so by using unphysical subgrid parameters for star formation, a new process, that are finely tuned to that specific dataset. When asked to predict the Lyman alpha forest absorption, a different kappa new observable using quasar light, or the galaxy properties at high redshift, a different omega regime, it fails. It was gamed to pass its initial benchmarks. The skill you gain as a metric auditor is the ability to think adversarially about measurement itself. You learn to ask, how could this test be gamed? If I wanted to achieve a high score without true understanding, what shortcut could I take? What is the spirit versus the letter of this metric? Does the rule satisfy the letter, the exact calculation, while violating the spirit, the underlying epistemic goal? 3. What rotated tests would break a gained rule? What different way of measuring omega, kappa, and nu would expose the cheat? This skill is the final hardening of the epistemic firewall. It acknowledges that we are not just filtering passive errors, we are defending against active, intelligent, if often unconscious, exploitation of our systems. Let us reiterate the core axiom this defense protects. Rules do not become real by elegance, consensus, or tradition. They earn a license only by surviving falsification, variation, independence, and scope discipline. Goodharting is the ultimate perversion of this process. It creates rules that appear to survive falsification because the tests are gamed, exhibit variation within a controlled set, and claim independence using manipulated metrics. The anti-Goodharting defense restores integrity by adding a meta layer, surviving falsification by an adversary who knows your tactics, and the corresponding firewall action. When a rule fails, we do not believe harder. We tighten, downgrade, or retire its license. When a rule is caught gaming, we do not adjust the metric to accommodate it. We invalidate its certification entirely. We mandate a red team review. We force a restart with harder, more adversarial tests. Let us now crystallize the epistemic function of this part, part 41. We have defined the defense against Goodharting. This is the firewall's adversarial layer, designed to prevent rules from being optimized to pass our tests instead of capturing truth. It mandates that final certification depend on performance in rotated test suites, new omega, kappa, na regimes, new measurement modalities, new data representations that were not used for tuning. It treats high performance on a known test suite as a potential vulnerability, not a final proof. The firewall acts as the adversarial validator, employing rotated test suites and red team analysis to expose gaming. The explicit prediction for a true rule is robustness to test rotation, consistent performance across changes in testing methodology. The explicit falsification condition is the Goodhart signature, a sharp collapse in performance when the test suite is rotated, revealing the rule was gamed. The license consequence is invalidation and mandatory red team review, the strongest corrective action short of permanent archiving. With this, the firewall's adversarial defenses are complete. We have a system that is not only robust to error, but resilient to manipulation. It expects and counters the human tendency to play the system. It ensures that the path to a license is aligned as closely as possible with the path to truth. But this adversarial stance suggests a final institutional imperative. If gaming is a constant threat, and if our best defense is adversarial testing, then we must not wait for gaming to be discovered accidentally. We must systematically attack our own rules before we trust them. We must build a culture where every rule, before it is widely licensed, is subjected to a dedicated, systematic attempt to break it. Next, we institutionalize attack. Red team the rule before it earns trust. Salam, and peace be upon you.